behalf of Beyond Law CLC, welcome you all to yet another webinar in our pursuit to learn knowledge during these testing times and through speakers who can share knowledge. And Justice Roshan Dalvi, a former judge of Bombay High Court, as such needs no introduction, especially on this platform and those who are watching her on different platforms. While she was adorning the bench and thereafter demitting the office also, she has been sharing her knowledge on the platforms, on the webinars and seminars. So webinars have been the new facet which has come during testing times. And her webinars on all platforms, and especially on Beyond Law CLC, have been well received, and this forces us to persuade ma'am, though she readily agrees. My word to persuade ma'am is a wrong word, I would say in the right sense, because she invariably agrees upon our request that she should share her knowledge. And a topic which is quite close to the heart of ma'am, that human rights of victims of sexual offences, wherein she wants that, and we were also agreeing upon that it requires a topic which requires sensitization as to what are the human rights of the victims of sexual offences. We do talk about sexual offences, we do talk about human rights, but at least I have not been able to see any such discussion on a YouTube or etc. on any point where human rights of victims of sexual offences could be seen. I can always be stand corrected. That is always, one can always learn from someone that there are certain topics. But be that as it may, I would say that the society does require sensitization on this aspect. And that is why we requested ma'am, and ma'am has acceded to our request. And those who have been connecting us for the first time on the Facebook or on this platform, for their insights were just informing that ma'am had been practicing in the Bombay High Court for 13 years, and thereafter she served as a judge in the Bombay City Civil and Sessions Division. And thereafter she also adorned the bench of the Bombay High Court. She is an erudite speaker, coupled with the fact that she has an immense knowledge. That two facts which I have always, above all the skills which ma'am has, one is to keep on learning and keep on sharing. This is a facet which I've learned during these testing times from ma'am. And as I had shared that, in fact, when I connected with ma'am was only through YouTube, when I saw From Struggle to Success, successful YouTube program of the Bombay High Court, wherein I saw that ma'am had that skills of speaking as well as knowledge. Thereafter, I requested her ma'am to share the knowledge, and then the journey started and so on. She has given the insights on different aspects, coupled with, she has also joined a lot of webinars, wherein she added the right canvas, things were being taken on. Over to you, ma'am, without taking much time.
Thank you, Vikas, for your introduction. I would like to first introduce this topic because very few people seem to think anything about it. Now, we have got a criminal justice system where the state prosecutes an offense, but the state is not the victim. There is another victim, and her or his rights are almost never considered. We consider the rights of the accused, and we have come of age. Our Article 21, we believe, applies to the accused, to the prisoners, to the convicts, etc. But what happens on the other side of the coin? When there is a complaint which is filed, when a woman has undergone trauma, when a man has lost his son in a murder, and there are all sorts of victims, more especially, of course, the victims of sexual offenses, because those are very traumatic experiences. And therefore, I would always believe that sensitization of a judge and a lawyer begins with understanding what kind of victim is before the court? That victim is usually the complainant. If the victim is dead, it is somebody else on behalf of the complainant who is then a victim. Suppose a woman is burnt in her household, her parents would be victims. Suppose a man is murdered, his mother would be a victim. If a woman is raped, she would be the victim. If a child is sexually molested, the child, she or he, would be the victim. Now we understand that there should be special laws for women and children under Article 15.3. And some of these laws relate to the victims of sexual offenses. The most important being POCSO. We came of age in 2012, but even before 2012, there were thousands of victims who were not cared for. Now, in all good democracies, in the Western democracies, they have a special corner for victims, victims of all crime. In America, they have Victims of Crime Act. And the purpose and object of that act shows that it is the right of the victim to speak. It is the responsibility of the nation to listen. And therefore, victims there are heard at every stage of a trial. They are heard at the stage of bail. They are heard at the stage of evidence. Then they are heard at the stage of sentencing and also at the stage of parole. These are the four main aspects where victims' rights are considered and the victim is given the right of hearing. It seems to be very alien to us, but we are also coming of age. And I had done this in the United Nations where I was called, and we had drafted the protocol on the rights of the child victims of sexual offenses. They may be boys or they may be girls, but they are victims. And this protocol is today our POCSO, the Prevention of Sexual Offenses Against Children Act, that we know. This is the only legislation today where a victim has to be represented by a lawyer. A victim has to be protected under the law. Then the victim has to be heard and rehabilitated if it is required. So it is the most sensitive legislation today, so far as victims are concerned. Now we will consider our angles, the angle of the lawyers and the judges. So far as lawyers are concerned, they believe that either there is a prosecutor or there is a defense counsel. So the lawyers have got that much of work, you can say, in our justice system. They either become prosecutors or they work for the defense. But no, there could be lawyers who could represent the victims other than the prosecutor. This would throw open a whole line of profession to the lawyers. Now, please understand, when we have got our writs, for example, the lawyers appear for the victims as also the accused in writ petitions, criminal writ petitions. And they are argued out threadbare because a victim is represented. She or he has got legal representation, which is extremely material at a given time. She's not forgotten. He is not forgotten. Okay. Let us take an example of a 138 application. It is a private complaint. But for the private complaint, there is one lawyer for the complainant and there is one lawyer for the accused who has defaulted in dishonored the check or whatever. Similarly, when we have DV cases, for example, there is one lawyer for the complainant, which is the wife, and one lawyer for the accused, which is the husband or anybody else. Okay. So it is very good in our system if we have lawyers representing both these parties, the public prosecutors, police prosecutors notwithstanding. They would be there. There would be some victims who may not get that representation, who may not be able to access a lawyer. Then the public prosecutor is always available because the state prosecutes the crime. Okay. Now, why is this required? That sensitization which we must have, we must understand you can say the inside story of a person who wants to access the criminal justice machinery. And how would that be? So if you give me a minute, I'll share my presentation and we'll go step by step as to what are those offenses, how are the human rights affected, and what we require to understand, which is not in our textbooks.
Sure.
The host can share in this meeting. Only the host. Okay, Vikas, it shows that only the host can share. So can you share or can you allow me to share? I've got my presentation.
No, I'm allowing it. I'm just allowing it.
Yes, yes. Okay, you can allow me to share.
Ronnie? Yes, allow it. Just see that, ma'am, we have allowed it.
Yes, yes. Because it shows only the host can share.
Allowed? No, I've just started. Just see that. Is it okay? Just try that.
What's that going on? I don't know.
You said something, you pay attention to that.
Ma'am, is it, I've allowed you, whether it's being done, just check it
Okay,
out.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Just a minute.
Google Drive. Okay.
दिखा इसको over there. Connect to Google Drive Zoom.
No, open kar aage na. No. This is wrong.
I'm saying that. Hello.
I kept it open.
Okay. So may I begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Vikas?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now these are human rights of victims of sexual offenses. Okay. Now, who are these victims of human rights violations? Essentially, now because we are doing sexual offenses, women and children. Children will be both boys and girls, and of course, women if the girl is over 18 years in our system. But there are some others like migrant workers. Their children, as well as their sort of women, are very much oppressed and violated. Sex workers are specifically violated. Trafficked children and trafficked women are violated again and again. And domestic workers, in several cases, are also violated. Now, what are the offenses infringing these human rights? I would have mentioned about all these offenses. There may be some more, which you may be able to tell me if you want. So, feticide, because this is under the PCPNDT Act that we have got because of our male preferences. Trafficking is under the ITPA because there is trafficking at the source level, at the destination level, and at the transit level. Domestic violence is all the violence which happens in the household. It is generally against the wife, but it can also be against, say, an old mother.
Ma'am, you will have to recheck on that aspect because your screen is frozen and we are not seeing the screen sharing what you're doing. Or either you will have to reload. Yeah, your screen, in fact, your photograph. I'm trying at my end, somehow it's not doing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I'll ask someone from my office. Meanwhile, you just see because your photo is also frozen. Yeah, now it's visible. Yeah. And now just try the screen sharing. Yes, ma'am, screen sharing has been started, but it's not in the right direction. Yes.
Now, do you get it?
Yes, now it's right, but we are not able to say you.
Now, okay. Okay.
Ma'am, you should be your photo. You should be visible on the right side of the screen, but that we are not able to see.
So I begin from the beginning. The various victims of human rights violations. Essentially, for sexual offenses, they would be women and children. Okay, children will be boys as well as girls. Then there are migrants who are the migrant laborers, and they are
And you
always
will
at
have
risk.
to, you have closed your video. You will also have to show your video on. You are not visible. Now screen is on, but the video is not on. Your video,
No, but I
your
can't
video.
put my video on there. I can't put it on because I'm on the mobile. If you share it, it will be there.
Okay, I will try that.
Otherwise, you
Meanwhile,
will see only my presentation.
okay, I will do that. I will try that. You can continue. I will just try.
Okay, then you can share it.
No, ma'am, you do the screen sharing. Meanwhile, I will try and I will let you know.
So, but can you see my slide?
Yeah, slides we are seeing.
I think that should be fine because there's no need to see me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
And then after that, after the slides are over, then we will be talking again. So you can see me. Okay?
Yes.
So let us first see who are the victims. Okay? Women and children. Then migrant laborers who are very much at risk of sexual offenses. Sex workers, that is whom we call prostitutes or commercial sexual persons, etc. The trafficked persons who are violated again and again and again because they are brought into prostitution or into hard labor. And the domestic workers who are sometimes violated. Now we see what are the offenses infringing these human rights, the sexual offenses. One is feticide. It begins with the life of the child in the womb. And that is under the PCPNDT Act. Because of our preference for boys, we tend to have female feticide. Then there is trafficking. Trafficking, as I told you, is a kind of a repeat offense all the time and the worst violations of human rights. Why is this coming again? Share. Nikle gaya. I came again.
No, ma'am, we are trying the screen sharing. You need not worry on that.
You are trying. Okay, you can try.
I'm trying that.
Did you get it?
Ma'am, just a sec. The office is just trying. So that we want that we can also see you while you are talking.
Very well.
Hello? Oh. Just a minute.
Okay. So may I begin?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we have done this.
Yes, next slide.
Okay, so these are the victims and these are the offenses. Now in offenses, we have feticide, domestic violence, battery, rape, aggravated rape, infanticide, pedophilia, pornography, forced marriages, incest, sexual abuse, outraging modesty, sodomy. These are some of the main ones. We also have, of course, eve teasing, and we have acid throwing, etc. All this could go under outraging modesty also. And they are now separate offenses under the amended IPC. Now, having seen these offenses and the kinds of victims, can you make it next, please? Go next slide. Okay. So now the legal provisions which apply to these victims. There are national laws and there are international covenants. Now, right from 1949, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Covenant for the Rights of the Child, CEDAW, and others which are not so important, but they also cover human rights. So far as our national legislations are concerned, next slide, please. Beginning with the Constitution of India and the IPC, which lays down all these offences, we have separate legislations, the ITPA or the PETA, Bonded Labour Prohibition Act, Domestic Violence Act, Child Labour Act, Juvenile Justice Act, and the most important, POCSO today, for all kinds of sexual offences. Okay. Now the next, please. Now these two tests are very important for us to understand the importance of the victimology, the doctrine of victimology. When does this apply? The two tests are, one is lesser numbers, greater attention. Now you see, whenever there is a lesser number of anything, there is always greater attention. For example, at home, if you have one child, you can devote 24 hours to the child. But even arithmetically, if you have 4 children, you can't devote 6 hours each. The child gets less and less. It is one thing to say that the parents will love the children equally, but it's another thing that is not possible. And therefore, in small homes with large number of children, generally it happens that children are neglected and persons who are sort of the sexual offenders against children, they are on a prowl. They know which are the children who don't get enough attention, and these are the vulnerable children. In school, the same thing happens. If you have a small school, the student-teacher ratio is very good. But if the school is a large school, or let us say a municipal school with 100 students in the class, the teacher cannot devote attention to all the children. The same principle applies. Lesser numbers, greater attention. This same principle goes also in countries which have a lot of population, so that there is always more offenses there. The criminal justice system is always used. And in courts, when the courts are also packed to capacity, you know that each judge, each court cannot devote so much time. So the same principle applies, and what happens at home becomes very material, especially in cases of violations of human rights of children. And children's rights are human rights, women's rights are human rights. Okay? So this is one test. The other test is what is called the test of the 3 R's. That is recognize, resist, and report. Now, most of these sexual offenses are such that people don't recognize that it is an offense. It is an offense which is committed or is about to be committed. They live in, you can say, denial, especially for children's sexual offenses. They say, no, हमारे घर में ऐसा होता ही नहीं है. But that is not true. Science has shown, the research has shown that most of the sexual offenses against children happen in the home. It begins with the father or the stepfather. It goes to uncles, grandfather. It also goes to, say, cooks and drivers in sort of more elitist families where children are exposed to this. And this applies to boys as well as girls. So it's best that we recognize that this problem exists in every society, including ours. Once we recognize that, the schools, the parents, the NGOs can work together to solve that issue. When you recognize, you can teach your child how to say no. But what happens is that children say that when something happens, there is nobody to listen. They say, नहीं ऐसा होता है क्या? ऐसा नहीं बोलते. ये तो uncle है. You know, that sort of thing. With the result, a child suffers quietly and silently. And it is for these victims that they require separate. We have got POCSO for that now. The second principle is resist. We must teach our children to resist any bad advance. Similarly, we must resist that. If a woman, for example, if she has been sexually molested or raped, then she must resist the idea of putting it under the carpet. No, she has to report. That is the third, so that the criminal justice machinery must go on. Under POCSO, there is a crime for anyone who knows that there is a sexual offense committed against a child and who does not report. You see, So these are the first baby steps in victimology in our country. And it should come actually for all the offenses. Just as on the civil side, we have got the commercial courts. And the commercial courts now apply also to all the cases of 3 lakhs. So you see the jurisdiction has expanded. Similarly, the POXO must have the jurisdiction expanded. Okay. So having understood these 2 tests, if we get a case, either as a lawyer or a judge, we must understand that this is a child who has been sexually molested, because at home, there may not have been, it may have been a neglected child. What is it that we have to find out? And if the child gets representation, the lawyer will be able to find out that and put it forth in his examination in chief or her examination in chief. Similarly, if a judge understands that, the judge will understand that this is a victim who is an innocent victim, a small child. We all have children. When I had a case like this, I thought I have a son who is as old as this child who has been sexually molested. But this child was a neglected child. And once you have that sensitization, everything else falls in place. Okay, so next slide, please. Now, these are the vulnerable victims, mainly. So the street children and the homeless children are very vulnerable to migrants and missing children, especially a child who is missing. He encounters a lot of sexual offenses, even of minor types, maybe not a complete molestation, but it's a very traumatic experience. Then orphaned, abandoned, and destitute children are in shelter homes. And we've got so many cases. There is a very important case in Bombay High Court, where the Bombay High Court, in its writ jurisdiction, has appointed Tata Institute of Social Sciences to work on these abandoned children, because they are molested by the people who are in charge and who are going to take care of them. And those are the people who sexually violate these children, boys and girls. Then the working children, working women are violated. The differently abled persons who are, say, handicapped people, we may not call them handicapped or retarded. We must understand that they are handicapped. And when they are mentally or physically handicapped, or they are differently abled, as we now call them, they are more prone to this sexual violence because they cannot take care of themselves, because they will not be able to resist an onslaught. Okay. Then HIV/AIDS affected persons are differently, of course, but violated. The substance abused, that is the persons who are into drugs, are also violated because they don't understand what goes on with them. The beggars, the abused children, the trafficked children are the most violated, and children of prostitutes, they are kind of separately dealt with because they begin their lives in very different circumstances. So for their representation, for their protection, we would say that there are 2 groups of partners. One group of partners is the social partners. That is the parents, teachers, friends, and NGOs. No, not this. Keep that please. Now, these form the partners in a social scenario. We have to create awareness for them. It is no good only lawyers and judges knowing about it. But let us say the school teachers must understand that so many of their children may be at risk. And therefore, this awareness creation becomes very important. And then when something goes wrong, then we require an attitudinal change, because then the partners become different. Then a crime has been committed, an offense is committed. Then we have the medical officers to take medical reports, police officers to draft the complaints and to take the child to the magistrate under 164, etc. The legal officers who are the prosecutors, as also the lawyers. And the lawyers would be the lawyers for the victim in POXO, so far only in POXO, but it should be for everyone, and the lawyers for the defense, and the judicial officers. The judges ultimately who are at the top of the ladder. So even if the other 3 officers are good, if the judge is not sensitized, everything goes haywire. And the first question that a judge must ask is, who is this victim and how come this particular crime is committed the way it is written in the charge sheet? Okay. So for that, we must understand what is the impact of that abuse on human rights. Now, this you will not find in any textbook, not even in POCSO. But I would say that these are the main impacts, and there are many more, of course. I would like if the audience can share, instead of just sharing, thank you. If you can share some of these, it will be nice. So I would say destroying psychology of the person who is sexually molested is the prime thing. It devastates life. It gives a bitter shock. Then there is disgust and disbelief. So when that child comes to court to give evidence, there is so much disbelief in our justice system and in everyone who is there with whom she is encountering. Then there is suspicion. Will somebody think only I have done something wrong, or was it? And suspicion of whether she will ever get justice. Then there is helplessness, because in our justice system, technicalities take precedence over so much of merits, and there is so much that a child or a woman will never understand. Frustration is always there, because all the time they come to court and go back, and the matters never reach. Then when the matter reaches, a kind of anxiety: who will listen? Will they really understand my story? Will they be able to appreciate it? That calls for appreciation of evidence. And then there is loss of security, because that child feels so unsecure in our system, which is so overcrowded, that there has to be specific provisions made for NGOs, for what in Western countries they call guardian ad litem, to be appointed for that child. The first time we have that in POCSO. Then, of course, the feeling of guilt is because of our society, where, especially in this kind of offenses, people feel that you are only at wrong. Instead of giving her all the support, people just point the fingers. And therefore, that feeling of guilt always creeps in. Then there is fear of disclosure. If I disclose, will it go against me? Will the accused then take revenge? What will happen? Will somebody else come to know of it later on in my life? So all that is there when she has to come to give evidence. And that leads to a lot of confusion. Can anyone tell me about some other impact that you can think of for such women and children? Okay, if at present they can't, it's fine. We can just go on with the presentation, please, Vikas. So now we must understand the causes of this victimization. The very first cause is our population. Larger numbers, lesser attention. Now there is so much of population, there's so much of overcrowding. There are so many children in the home, there are so many people in the courts. Everything is debilitating, for these kind of offenses. Then why do they get into these offenses? The main reason is poverty, which is because of population. If you have one child, the child will be very well supported. But if you have four, then the child will not be so well supported. And if you have eight, surely they're going to go haywire. So poverty is a root cause of so many of these offenses, especially trafficking. Family size, as I always told you, so many children. Vulnerability is the special vulnerability which we dealt with, the vulnerable victims. Then lack of education for all these children and women, because they cannot stand on their own 2 feet. Lack of employment opportunities also comes because of lack of education. Then lack of care and protection comes right from the childhood and even later in life when some kind of offense takes place. Low female ratio is one other offense, especially for infanticide, feticide, etc., etc. Demand plus profit is the principle of trafficking. The traffickers are in the business of trafficking. They have a career in crime. And therefore, the ITPS says we must deal with the traffickers separately, distinctly, under specific legislation. And of course, poor law enforcement, because if we don't have law enforcement, which is quick, which is expedient, and which comes up to the end very quickly, then all those impacts are there over a period of time. Now what we understand, this is a little aside, but we must understand the difference between trafficking and smuggling. Now trafficking is when a child is bought, abandoned, or sold and then taken into, say, a girl child is taken into prostitution or into domestic help. A boy child may be taken into, say, brick kilns or other kinds of hard labor. All this is trafficking, where there is no consent, where there is total helplessness. Nobody has wanted to be trafficked. But migrant smuggling is a little different. It is in steps. First, a person wants to be smuggled out of his or her country. Generally, it happens with adults, not with children. So from Nepal, they come into India. From Bangladesh, they come into India. From India, they go to Dubai. From India, they go to America, Italy. This is when a person wants to go. He wants to be smuggled out of the country because he will not be able to go there and be there under a valid visa. He's taken. But then there is deceit. He wants to go, let us say, to Dubai to work in a, let us say, a textile industry. But she is taken for some kind of trafficking and then taken onwards to other countries. Or they are taken into a factory, their passports are taken away, and there is no way they can return when they find that they are completely violated. And those are human rights violations. Okay. So having understood this little difference between smuggling and trafficking, we will have to understand what kind of cases come up before the courts. So next, please. Now we also understand what is sexual and commercial exploitation. It may be of children, it may be of boys and girls and women. So sexual exploitation is in brothels, deals with pornography, massage parlors, bars, and of course, the highest is pedophilia, when boys are sexually abused. Commercial is in industrial labor, domestic help, organ removal for transplants, illegal adoptions, when the child is presumably adopted but then taken as a servant, beggary also, and camel racing is rare, but it is there. Next, please. So now we understand where this child or this woman who is a victim of sexual offenses stands in our criminal justice system. Our criminal justice system is built with the accused at the center stage. It is built with an adult at the center stage. There are very few children, and there are victims who are completely ignored. So we have the victim versus accused syndrome. As I told you, there is accused representation, accused support, and accused participation, legal participation. But we must have victim representation, victim support, and victim participation also. So our lawyer must be there to represent our victim. And you can imagine how much more work lawyers would have if we have a really sensitized criminal justice system. There will be double the work. One lawyer for this side and one lawyer for that side, just as in a civil suit. Then there is a child versus adult syndrome. Everyone in our court is an adult. The judge, the police, the prosecutor, the defense counsel, the staff. Now imagine a child who has been sexually assaulted. And that child has to come to give evidence with all the impact which I told you. That child finds himself or herself completely alone. There is no friend. All are enemies of the child. The biggest enemy is the judge and the police. Understood? The other biggest enemy is the lawyer of the defense. Now, in this, we require a child-friendly atmosphere, which we had in the United Nations Convention, which has been picked up now in India under POCSO. And I wish it goes for everyone. But nevertheless, okay, so let's see further. Now, how do we deal with this kind of a victim? A victim whose human rights are so physically and sexually violated. We treat them differently, accused and the victim. Accused has all the rights. He will have the lawyer. There will be first a search for the in a trafficking case for the accused. The accused will be produced, he'll be arrested. He has to be interrogated. Now, after his arrest, he can be released on bail or he can be in custody. That would be police custody or then thereafter judicial custody. But there must be a stringent bail for all these offences. Otherwise, our experience has shown that they just abscond. Now, victim. How do you deal with a trafficked victim or a victim of any other sexual offense? For trafficked victims who are in brothels or anywhere, they are trafficked and brought there against their wish, without their consent. Even children are trafficked into prostitution. First, the NGOs will find out that, and the police must work with the NGOs. There is a raid. In the raid, they are rescued. After they are rescued, the real trial begins. Trial means her trials, her impact. What happens is, in so many cases, the accused and the victims of trafficking are brought together. One lawyer represents both of them. They apply for bail as if to say the victim is also an accused. They are all released on bail. These victims are taken back into the brothels. They are re-victimized again and again, so that then the NGOs have to work to get them out. Therefore, under our JJA, that is the Juvenile Justice Act, we have the children on the wrong side of the law, the children in need of care and protection. So these victims are children in need of care and protection. They have to be brought before the CWC. They don't have to be taken to the police. They don't have to be interrogated. They have to be interviewed by the CWC or by the counselor appointed by the CWC. This is where the real difference begins. Understood? Once that begins, things would be more or less settled. So let's see now how the trial would proceed. Now we have what we call victimization is done. Now we have what is re-victimization, or what we call secondary victimization. The child first has to go for police investigation. FIR is recorded. He has to go to the magistrate. The magistrate will record the statement. Again and again, the child has to repeat the experience that is not repeatable. That is always traumatic. Okay. Then there is medical examination. Again, the doctor will ask so many questions, and the child has to give the history, the medical history. And then the medical examination takes place. And then is the worst of all, the court trial. Not only does it end quickly, it doesn't even begin quickly. The child begins to forget. And at that time, again, the main impact comes on, because the trial reaches hearing. And then the police will come, get the child as a witness to court. And then the child will have to face the entire court. So in this court trial, we have to visualize what this little child will be going through. Okay. So next, please. Now, these are the troubles in our justice system. There are a number of cases which are not reported. They will never come to court. I am talking about them, but while I am talking, there are so many cases which are happening. But you and I, lawyers and judges, will never know of them. Then there are a number of cases which are not pursued. They may be reported. The charge sheet may be filed. Even after that, they are not pursued. Now, there are two opinions, and both are correct. One is that the accused must be brought to justice, and therefore you must pursue. But it is very easy to say by you and me that it must be pursued. It is very difficult for that child to pursue. The child may have grown after 3, 4, 5 years, the case may come up. The girl may be married. She may not want this kind of trauma again in her life. And we don't know what is the real good thing for her. Suppose a child has to undergo surgery. What do we say? We have got a choice. We'll say, no, no, no. This child cannot undergo this surgery. You please treat the child by some medicines and let us hope that everything gets over. But in our criminal justice system, we don't do that. And therefore, they turn hostile. So some witnesses may be tutored, some witnesses may turn hostile. These witnesses may be the victims themselves, or they may be other witnesses. Similarly, the child witnesses who are tutored may be the victims who are supposedly victims, but it may be turn out to be a false case. I have had this kind of a false case. I would like to share that with you all. And then some cases are doctored. So what happens is that there is some kind of enmity between adults, and they put up a child and they doctor a case. It is a completely false case, but only when it goes on, the judge will be able to appreciate the evidence and really understand that this is a doctored case where the accused would have to be honorably acquitted, not on benefit of doubt, but honorably. And of course, sometimes there are collusive investigations, so that even though a crime has to be prosecuted, the police may collude with the accused. Either he may be corrupted or for whatever reason, and then there is no justice. So these being the troubles. Now we must understand what are the requirements of our criminal justice system in these. These are divided into three parts. Infrastructure, which must be required for these kind of offenses, interpretation of the best judgments and the best of the laws in favor of children, in favor of the victims, and sensitivity. Now, infrastructure costs a lot. What I would say is India is somewhere in the middle of all the countries in the world. The Western countries have a very superb infrastructure for these offenses. We are not able to have that yet. But there are many other countries much poorer than us who don't have any infrastructure at all. And I wonder what would be happening to those children whose offenses, against whom the human rights offenses are never made known at all. Now, in this infrastructure, what happens is, first, in a very fine system, like let us say in England or America, there are victim support centers. Now, I have visited some of these victim support centers when I was studying in England, and I found that they were like 3-star hotels. So there, all these human rights violations and all the sexual offenses victims are brought. Until that victim feels secure enough to go out, they are kept there. It is like a hotel, and there their statements are recorded. It is audio recorded. The audios are sealed. Now it is video recorded. The videos are sealed. One video is given to the victim, one video is given to the accused, and the victim is allowed to stay there. Her medical examination takes place there. Her, what we call 164 report, whatever they call, that takes place there before the magistrate. And after that, when the victim wants to leave, she leaves or he leaves. Then there are victim examination suites. So when the victim is examined, when the victim's statements are recorded, they are in separate suites, not only in that building, but in separate suites. And at the time of trial, there is video recording of the statements, which now we have also, and video recording of evidence, which we now have. So that the victim is kept in a separate room, the accused is kept in a separate room. In all these criminal justice systems, the accused must be able to hear and see the trial, and that must be provided. So in video recording, the accused is in a separate room. He understands everything. He sees everything. He can give, he can communicate with his own defense lawyer, and therefore the rights of both are equally matched. Okay. Now, suppose we don't have this infrastructure. Even then, we can have sensitivity, and sensitivity costs nothing. On zero budget, we can work just as well. So I would like to tell you what are the various things that our judges. So in interpretation, of course, it is interpretation of judgments and statutes. I don't want to go in details, but sensitivity brings about a court climate and a courtroom conduct. Now let's see how we can have this sensitivity. So next, please. Yes. Now, which are the stages which require sensitivity? I told you that in America, under the Victims of Crime Act, there are 4 separate stages during which a victim is heard, understood, and kept and protected. We have the stage of bail. Now, in the stage of bail, we hear the accused and we hear the state. But do we hear the victim? The victim may have a lot more to say than what the prosecutor may say or the police may say. It is a completely different angle. In POCSO, yes, the victim is represented. Similarly, even an adult victim of a similar offense requires and deserves to be represented. It's not yet in our system, but it must come soon. Then there comes the stage of evidence. Now, the stage of evidence is divided into two parts. First is the recording of evidence. This is when her examination and cross examination takes place. Second is the appreciation of evidence. This will take a long time, just wait, please. So, now for recording and appreciation of evidence, how it is done, today we have it in POCSO, and every judge and every victim lawyer can demand it and do it. At the time I was a sessions judge, there was no POCSO, but I had done it in some of my trials. And I would like to share that experience with you because it is a kind of a homegrown experience, I would say. So I was recording the evidence of a child of 10 years. She was sexually molested when she was 5 years old. I have written about this case in the chapter on criminal jurisprudence in my book, Tangible Justice, and I have set out the entire story of this particular case. Now, how it happened was that she was playing outside her basti. And as I said, there were many siblings. It was a small house in a slum colony. And just as parents would say, there are too many children. There is a small room in which they all live. Chalo, bahar jaake khelo. She was on a holiday, which happened to be a Republic Day, playing outside her hut. The accused was her neighbor. He gave her a chocolate and called her in his hut. And then he did what he should not have done. Now, she was 5 years old at that time. She was 10 years old when she gave evidence before me, because in Bombay there is a lot of arrears of cases. Now, I kept this case on a specific clear day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I came to learn that she was going to a school in the morning time. So I said, let her go to school, and after her school, she can come to court. So it was to be after the recess on a specific day. So date and time. Now that is in our POCSO today. Give a specific date and specific time before a judge who takes all these matters. So there is a specific judge also. I happen to be that judge. Now she came, and I made a kind of an entire conspiracy with my staff. I had a very good staff. They always wanted to work for justice. So I told my judicial clerk, whom we call Sheristirar, that we are going to take up this case. I don't want to try this case in the court. I want this in the chamber. So first of all, we will take our computer in the chamber. This was in about 2001 when computers were new, well before our POCSO. And we had made all those arrangements. My peon was also very much charged up, and everyone was working for that child. And I told them that in the recess time, she will be coming. Only see to it that she doesn't see the accused person, because that will really bring real trauma in her mind. So I wanted to avoid that. And they said, Madam, don't worry, we will do that. So they kept her separately. The accused was to be kept wherever all the accused are kept in the dock. And I said, as soon as I come, call out this case, and then I will do the needful. And my stenographer was to be in the chamber with me. So I went to court. And for recording the evidence, or her evidence, they called out the matter. And I said, yes, has the witness come? Yes, witness has come. So immediately I said, please come to my chamber. We will record evidence in the chamber. And I left the court. It was something very new. And so many people would think very radical. Does the accused have any right? But I know what right the accused has, and he would have it. I went to my chamber, and the first thing that I did, I took out my band and gown. I sat on my chair, and in the meantime, as I had told my staff, they sent her in first. And within 2 minutes, they sent both the accused lawyer and the prosecutor, because they would have been quite surprised. This was not done before. And I had not had this kind of a matter before. So as soon as she came, the only thing I did, I said, Beta, idhar baith ja. So she was right in front of me. I took out my hand and I only told her, I said, Beta, abhi jo kuch hua hai na, aaj mujhe bol dene ka hai. Okay? Last time bolne ka hai. So she said, okay, haan, auntie. And in the meantime, both of those lawyers came. So I gave them the place flanking her. On one side was the prosecutor, on the other side was the accused lawyer. Now I told them, I said, see, she is a child. We all have children. We must understand that she may have gone through something wrong, something really bad. It may or may not be, it is for me to find out. So please give me that slide. So keep that slide on, Vikas. The slide has turned. Just go to the correct slide. Yes, keep that slide. So they said, okay. I said, first thing I want you to do is to lower your voice. Please don't shout because she's sitting right next to you. Then I told the prosecutor that I don't want the identification of the accused in the beginning. Because in Bombay, they have identification just after the little introduction of the complainant's case. And the complainant says, yes, he was the man who did it. He was the man who robbed my chain, whatever that is, you know. I said, this will come last. You please start the evidence. Now, what I had done was I had recorded her mother's evidence first because she was the complainant and the mother was free. So I called the mother inside and I made the mother sit next to me. On the other side was my stenographer. And while I was explaining to her this, my peon brought in the accused. And the accused was sitting right behind the child. He could hear the entire trial. He could see the witness. He was kept outside. And our chambers being very small, behind the accused was the wall. So it was a small, compact room. I had told the police not to come in. I had told my peon not to come in because I did not want any males and certainly not a police. The two lawyers were both males, of course. So the evidence began. The prosecutor started slowly telling her, and she started telling me her story. She came to that material point, and suddenly she choked. She cried, and then she was holding back her tears. And I was just thinking, maybe she will not say anything further. But she waited on. I waited with her, gave her some rest time. Again, this rest time is in our POXO now. It was not there earlier. It was just the duty, I would say, but the discretion otherwise of the judge. So slowly I said, take your time, you tell me. And then she said, in very short, he did this, and he pained me. That was the English of what she told me in vernacular. I recorded that. Then she did not say anything further. And the prosecutor asked her to identify the accused. Now, all along, I was looking at her and the accused who were in the same line of vision. The accused was right behind the girl, I told you. I was not seeing my stenographer. I was dictating to her and I was saying slowly, slowly, go slow. And we were recording the evidence. Now she had to tell me who was the accused. So she tells me, Auntie, वो अंकल नहीं है इधर. So I said, नहीं बेटा ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है? आप देखो इधर उधर चलो उठो आप उठ जाओ और देखो. Because I know that he was behind her and he was at his best. He behaved himself. Maybe he would not have, I don't know. But I was all the time looking at both of them and he behaved well. So she gave her evidence. And then she got up. And I said, idhar udhar dekho. So she turned. And she immediately looked into the face of the accused. And I could see that she has become absolutely ashen. She became white. And I thought for a moment that now she will not identify the accused because she has been traumatized. But at least this much of trauma she had to undergo because without that, nothing can happen in our justice system. And surely the accused deserves that much. So he heard everything. He saw her. She saw him. And it was like, a child has to be taken to the hospital. And you say, no, child cannot do surgery. Then the doctor will say, okay, go away. Because the child must bear this much. And then the child will become fine, would say the doctor. So it was like that. She turned back while I was just thinking that I am going to record her demeanor And I will say that she has identified the accused by her demeanor, because her face was his identification. That's what I would say. But she turned around and she tells me, आंटी यही वो अंकल है, यही वो अंकल है, she says. So I wrote down her demeanor, I recorded her answer, and I said, now cross examination in chief enough.
Ma'am, you will have to change the mobile. Your photograph has gone toxic, Karvi. Your mobile, it's upside down.
I have to change it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Now you give me the slide again, please. Can we go back to the slide?
Ma'am, stages
Or
requiring.
maybe I can do.
No, which one? Stages requiring sensitivity. What should be the topic? Is it
You're
fine?
not getting my slide?
Ma'am, there are two stages
Okay.
requiring sensitivity and another is judicial sensitivity, which we have to show.
Because I can't hear you well.
Ma'am, there are two slides, judicial sensitivity or stages of sensitivity. Which one you want to see? There are two slides. Stages regarding sensitivity
I want to
and
see the
judicial,
last slide.
judicial
Recording
sensitivity.
evidence and appreciation of
Recording
evidence.
evidence.
Yeah.
Next one, this is stages requiring sensitivity.
Okay, you put on any slide. I'll tell you which to go
Yeah,
to after.
this is stages requiring sensitivity. The stage of
Yes,
bail, the
yes.
stage of evidence.
Next
one.
slide.
Judicial sensitivity.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we never mind the slide. Now I'll just tell you. So then we began the cross-examination. And I told the accused lawyer that you take as long as you want, go quietly, slowly, but we will have to finish this today. I will not give you another chance. Take your time. So slowly he went through, then he would raise his voice and I would have to tell him no. And I would say that otherwise I will put questions, which is again in our POXO now, that the judge can hear the evidence in English and record it, hear the evidence in vernacular and record it in English, you know. So the questions can be put to the judge. So we did all that and it went off very well. And I convicted the accused. I gave him 10 years. Now, what I would say is that this is the recording of evidence with sensitivity which is required. Here, the judge, the police, the lawyer of the accused, the prosecutor, the staff, all play a part. All have to be sensitized. And it is not only one person who can do that, because otherwise it fails. But once the evidence is recorded, the next stage is the appreciation of evidence, which is what the lawyers have to argue and the judge has to do. So the judge will have to think, what is this kind of a child? That is the beginning of appreciation. This is a child who was 5 years old. She was living in a slum. She was living in a small house. There was no place for her. She had so many siblings. She was asked to play outside. This would be her routine. The accused was in her neighborhood. He would know that this child is outside so many times. So this child is a very vulnerable victim. In this scenario, she comes to court and gives her evidence. This also has to be appreciated along with the evidence which is on record. And it must in some form come on record, because how will I know otherwise? It has come on my record, therefore I know. So that has to be brought out by the lawyer of the victim or the prosecutor, if the prosecutor is so sensitized, and of course by the judge. Having done this, then comes, of course, you record all other evidences just the way you record in every other matter. And then the stage of decision. So if you come to the conclusion that the case is not proved, of course, acquittal. If not, sentencing. It may be fine, it may be a sentence. It must be very stringent if there is a conviction, because then it is proved beyond reasonable doubt. Now I would like to give you another case of mine of a similar nature but very different. to understand how one can appreciate the evidence. I had a case of incest. The father was supposedly having raped the daughter. The daughter was 16 years old. The father was in custody. When I read the papers, I thought, oh my God, again, this is one of these sensitive matters. I must put it on board at one time and take it up the same way. And now my staff was prepared. So we made the same arrangement. I called the girl inside. The father was working in Dubai. He was arrested and then not released on bail, so he had lost his job. The evidence began. This 16-year-old daughter gave evidence against her father. She cried, she wept before me. And I thought that this is the trauma that she's undergoing, knowing that this is my father who has done this. And I recorded that evidence. There was nothing like identification. The father was sitting behind her. The lawyer was there. The lawyer allowed everything to be said, the accused lawyer. And then when his cross-examination began, the story really unfolded. This is where you require a victim's lawyer, just as you require an accused lawyer, to put them on par with, the equality of rights. Now, this lawyer was the accused lawyer, brought before me the admissions of the girl. What were the admissions? The father was married and estranged from his wife. The wife had gone away many years ago and lived in the same locality. The father had 3 children. They were living in a small row house. So there was a ground floor portion and a first mezzanine floor portion. The children would go to the mother also and the father also as they wished, because they were in the same locality. And when the children were with the father, they used to sleep on the mezzanine floor. The father would be there also. Brothers, sisters were together. 3 years went past. Nothing happened. Then the father married again. During these 3 years, the father was giving maintenance for the children to the mother. These used to come by way of telegraphic transfers from Dubai to Mumbai in his bank account. After he got married, he stopped the maintenance. Now, of course, the children are entitled to maintenance, definitely, and those proceedings could have been taken. But the father got married, he had to support a younger wife, he stopped the maintenance. It was then that the mother made this child actually speak lies. But because it was a case of incest, the father never got bail. And even I thought in the beginning, oh wow, this is a case of incest and I must try it that way. And when the cross-examination unfolded, the father came out absolutely clean. And that is when I understood the meaning of the tears of that girl. She knew that she was speaking lies against her own father. So you see, there can be all kinds of cases. This is a doctored false case. And the advocate of the father asked me a very poignant question. He said, just see the chronology. For 3 years, nothing had happened to this girl. She was 13 years, 14 years, 15 years old at that time. And only after I got married, I would do this to my child. When I have not done that, when I didn't have a wife. Now I've got another wife. Why would I do that to my daughter? And I could not answer him. I honorably acquitted the father quickly. So these are the 2 very gross cases that I have come across in my life. And in my book, when I have written about my various cases and memories, I have written about both these cases in the chapter on criminal jurisprudence. If you can, it is available on Kindle also. So if you can just go through it. I mean, it's an e-book also. And very well, that's it. So this is recording of evidence and appreciation of evidence. Once I found that one case deserves to be convicted, we must give a stringent sentence, a stringent fine, and then rehabilitation if the child is trafficked, especially if the child is trafficked. Now, in a child like this, she goes back to her home. There is no question of rehabilitation by the court. If, of course, the case is doctored, there is a false case, or there is, she turns hostile, and then the part of the evidence cannot be seen, then in that case, accused can be, of course, acquitted, then there is nothing more to be done for the child. So this is the court climate. Now, please, can you give me the next slide?
Yeah,
Vikas?
trafficking cases.
Yes, ma'am. This is checklist of trafficking cases.
Yes.
Collaboration
Jack,
between
you want to
police
see this one?
and
Checklist of trafficking
prosecutors,
cases.
The next slide,
surprise,
please.
raids
The next slide
on
after this.
brothels.
I think that should be the last one. No, there'll be
Holistic
some
approach.
few more.
This one
I
here,
think there is one, yeah,
holistic
checklist.
approach.
Can you
Holistic
open
approach.
any slide? I'll tell you which one it would be.
Checklist for trafficking. Yeah, okay.
Ma'am, one is judicial sensitivity. Just tell the slide number. I can stages of requiring sensitivity. We have done that.
Or can I share myself,
Visual
my
sensitivity is
presentation?
also-
It's okay if you don't see me.
Yeah, it's fine.
Really?
Ma'am, allow kar de.
I think because I'll share the presentation, you allow me to share it, please.
I will do that. I will do that.
Okay, so we have done this. We've done this one. Now, the court climate, it will be very important to see that. So in the court climate, what we have is, and now we have it under POCSO also, it is under the international covenants also. There should be special courts and officers, priority in disposal. There should be fixed dates and times, victim support and representation. All this I've told you. Then there should be contact with the court officials. The victim must have some kind of contact. They must know what is the who is the prosecutor, who is the lawyer, some NGO, whatever, and the court clerk, etc., so that she knows that, oh, this is a friendly atmosphere, and no contact with the accused. Now, in both of these matters, and especially in the first matter, the victim had no contact with the accused on the day she came to court. She genuinely believed that there was no accused, that that man was not present in court, and she could depose before me. Okay? When she knew, of course, then it was all over. So that was enough then. Now, I'll give you examples of some other judges. Another very good judge, a very sensitized judge in our court, in the POCSO court, she says that she put one accused in a very sensitive case between two cupboards, such that the child, victim of sexual offense, could not see the accused. This was, I think, a very good thing to do. One other judge reported to me that when she wanted to go to her chamber to do it after she had attended some of my workshops, the lawyer of the accused sort of refused to go and said that it cannot be because you must have in-camera trial. It is not in-chamber trial. Now, therefore, the judge could not conduct in the chamber, which is so much better because the judge sits on the same level as the victim. And all the accused and the accused lawyer and the prosecutor are close by, so we talk softly. And everything becomes child-friendly, as it should be now in the POCSO. I may say only one thing. The judge wanted to do it the correct way. The only difference was our criminal procedure code using the word in camera. Now, if you see the dictionary meaning of the word in camera, it means in an enclosed place because camera means a focus. It is an enclosed place like a chamber. So in chamber is actually in camera. And what I would say is that when we understand what we understand by in camera, it is not in camera. It does not take away that impact which this victim has. Why? Can anyone tell me if there is some kind of exchange? Or I will only tell you because I think there is no exchange today. We can't have an interactive session. What happens is that in an in-camera trial, who remains in the court? The judge, the accused lawyer, prosecutor, staff, police, all of these people remain in the court. Whom does this victim fear the most? The police, the judge, the accused lawyer, sometimes even the prosecutor, sometimes even the staff and the police. Now, all the persons whom she fears remain in the court in an in-camera trial. Now, whom does she not fear? When she comes to court, there are so many people. Our courts are packed to capacity. They are overcrowded. She doesn't fear all the passers-by. They don't know what matter she has come for. All those persons are taken outside the court in an in-camera trial. All the persons who are not concerned with the case, all the persons whom she does not fear, go out. She remains alone. Everyone is on the other side. That is how she feels, alone and lonely. Now, please understand, suppose we are going at 1 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, from a wedding. We have dressed up. We've got necklaces. Would we walk on the road? We don't walk. We go by taxi. We go by car. We go in a group. Why? Because anybody may come and rob the necklace. Correct? So we have security in numbers. It is that security that the child who is a victim of sexual offense especially must have and wants. And therefore, an in-chamber trial is the correct in-camera trial. Only in-camera trial, as we understand, is no good. Okay? Then only you will have no contact with the accused, and all these things of judicial sensitivity to have a very good court climate would be available to the victim. Okay. Now the next slide is courtroom conduct. Now we have very good courtroom conduct between lawyers and judges, between the judge and the accused who is brought to court, whether on bail or from jail. But what about the victims? So we have this evidence in chambers. We have a specific place for all. She must be right in front of the judge, very close to the judge on the same level as she, accused right behind her, some NGO or a mother or whoever, 40 degrees angle, the stenographer, another 40 degrees angle, and flanking her, the two lawyers. This is the specific place for all. The police and the peon will be right at the door, so that if there is any muddamal property to be brought, some skirts, some serum, some whatever, reports, etc., the police can be called in. Until then, she does not see the police. Then the second thing is victim confidentiality. We always maintain now a victim confidentiality even before POCSO. So victim's name is not mentioned. It is A versus so-and-so. In the foreign countries, they not only have victim confidentiality, but accused non-confidentiality. So the name of the accused, once the accused, only after the accused is convicted, his name is made known to everyone. So that is a kind of a name and shame game, they call it. We still don't have that. Then at the time of recording of evidence, which I told you, and the rest times, if she requires, in between the recording of evidence. So this completes a complete sensitive trial. Now, trafficking cases, which I told you the worst cases, this should be the checklist. Surprise raids, arrest, You have to arrest the brothel keeper, hotel owner, and the customers. Rescue the child victims. Send the victims for counseling. Produce the accused before the magistrate. The prosecutor must resist the bail application. Seal the brothel. That is section 18 of ITPA, most important. You have to seal the brothel so that again and again this crime does not take place over other children or the same child. And attach the properties of the brothel keeper or the hotel owner, if of course he has properties. And this is the whole holistic approach. I would say R, P, and C. I think it would be nice if you read this up rather than I say that. Okay, so if you have read that, then we go from ignorance to denial to partial acceptance. Then we get information, we take action. And that is how we have a whole solution. This would ensure human rights for victims. So therefore, I would say, hear those who cannot shout, listen to those who cannot speak. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now how, Ruby?
Yeah.
Going on.
Yes.
Okay, so now this has gone.
Yes.
If
We
there are
will
any
be-
questions, I will.
We have posted that 2 or 3 questions have come meanwhile. This is by Chandrasekhar. Why assist to a public prosecutor concept is not going well, as some victims are really in need of good lawyers to prosecute their case, and it's in line with your view, respected ma'am, that there should be a
Because
victim.
I can't hear you.
Just
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you see the chat?
yes, I'm seeing that.
If I can see the chat, I will answer.
Now is
I'm
it
on
audible,
chat.
ma'am? It's audible. Now is it audible?
Okay, slightly more. Yes. Tell me.
Yeah, I can read that. Chandrasekhar
Now, which
says, why
question do I see?
this is by Chandrasekhar. Why this is posted at 5:24. Why assist a public prosecutor concept is not going well, since some victims are really in need of good lawyers to prosecute the cases, and it's in line with your views, ma'am, that there should be some victim lawyers. What is your further take on that?
Because I'm not getting the time,
5:24.
but I can't find it on my handset.
I can read that again. It's in fact he's
But I
just
can't hear
buttressing.
you, Vikas.
Ma'am, he's
Just
just
let me
saying.
go through the chat. So then if there is a question, I will answer.
Yeah. Usko bula. Aman ko.
Why assistance to public prosecutor concept did not go well, as some victims are really in need of good lawyer to prosecute the cases, and it is in line with your view, respected man. Yes, I would say there should be a separate victim lawyer. If you are going to be able to lobby anything, you must lobby this for criminal justice system. I have found that whenever there is a separate lawyer, the victims are very well represented. And I gave you 2 examples, 138 cases and 498A cases, where there are separate lawyers. You see, this prosecutor has to work for so many matters, and even if a prosecutor is honest and diligent and everything, they don't get enough information. We can have a lawyer who will aid the prosecutor, and the prosecutor must accept that aid and then put it forward. That would be okay, in line with what I said. But the victim representation must be there, and that is for all the cases, but more so for these kind of cases. That is my personal opinion. And since we have got it in POCSO, this is the first step we have taken in the doctrine of victimology. We have to now take it forward and make it for all lawyers. So lawyers get more work, lawyers get different matters. Some lawyers may specialize as victim lawyers. Some lawyers may specialize as accused lawyers. Or some lawyers may appear for both. But the representation would be there. That would be the ideal thing to bring up our criminal justice system. I can read this. How can victim be taken to center stage where Mostly accused are sentenced.
This is by Lal Tejwani, ma'am.
I'm reading it.
How can be victim taken on a center stage where mostly accused? Okay, ma'am.
Accused are at center stage, especially in cases of parental alienation, which child is mostly falsely against the parent. See, so far as the criminal justice system is concerned, the father would be an accused. So the father, of course, throughout would be protecting the child, but at the time he comes under the scanner, he cannot protect his child. He has to only show that this child has got this parental alienation syndrome, or somehow the child has been alienated. And unless the father brings forth some kind of evidence, the judge would never be able to understand. It is like every other matter where we tell our people that evidence is required for the courts, civil matters or criminal matters. And if evidence cannot be brought, nothing can be done. It can be oral evidence, it can be documentary evidence. Documentary evidence is always better because it gives that clip, you know. Otherwise, oral evidence, if it is accepted by the court, it can be done. But unfortunately, there are these kind of cases, but there are fewer. There are many cases where a father also has molested the children truly, especially a stepfather. So it is not that only if a father says that there is parental alienation, it can be accepted by the court. So we have to understand and we have to weigh the balances. You know, a judge would always do that.
Ma'am, freeze.
Okay.
Ma'am, freeze. You know?
Now this question that there are 70% false cases, I don't think is given by any statistics. People say any kind of percentages. Some people say domestic violence, 93%. Now, we don't know whether it is 93 or whatever. When a case comes up before a judge, the judge has to understand that it may be a truthful case or a false case. He has to keep his mind open. She has to keep her mind open and see the evidence. And if the question is that, and if the judge comes to the conclusion it's a false case, acquittal. Honorable acquittal. And if the judge comes to the conclusion that it is a truthful case, then conviction and stringent sentence. And the question is why judicial officers are not strong to grant bail in false cases. Please understand, a judge is not a god. A judge will have to take all the evidence on record to come to a conclusive conclusion. So at the time of bail, it is only prima facie. And you cannot conclude that it's a false case in many cases. So therefore, bail may not be granted. Now take, for example, my case. The father who was in jail naturally did not get bail because it was a case of incest. The statement of the girl showed that the father had done all these things. Bail cannot be granted. But when the father brings his own evidence, then the tables will be turned. So you have to have evidence in court and you have to wait patiently.
Ma'am,
Now, some question is that there is some non-monetary reliefs which can be sought if the victim is not interested in damages. Now, in a criminal justice system, the victim is never interested in damages and damages are not granted. Damages can be granted, let us say, for you can say the breach of promise of marriage. If there are two youngsters, there is a promise of marriage and then he goes away, he abandons her, she gives birth to a child, then there is a rape case, it is a statutory rape, then it could have been a case for damages. But we don't have that in our civil justice system. Our damages jurisdiction does not extend, unfortunately, because all those cases would be better tried in the civil court as suits for damages for breach of promise of marriage rather than statutory rape. Because then for statutory rape, the man goes behind bars. He is also a young man. He was also in love. And ultimately, the girl turns hostile in so many cases. So these are all those checks and balances which we are required to have. Then somebody has asked about grants for NGOs. Now the grants for NGOs may come from the government or it may come from donations. Or it may come from, say, lawyers who are NGOs also. They do very good work. There are some lawyer firms which are NGOs for trafficking. Excellent human service they give. International Justice Mission, for example. Freedom Firm, for example. Then there are there are lawyers firms for specific complainants like Majlis, like Lawyers Collective, TIS. They also do very good work. But their donation has to come from the government or from private donors. Court cannot give that. Now, this victim relief fund, somebody has asked, how long will it take? Victim relief fund is there and it can be accessed. And if the victim is represented by a lawyer, it can go. In our system, it is under the Manu Dharya scheme. Under the Manu Dharya scheme, when there is a child victim, the FIR is recorded, 164 statement is recorded, her medical evidence is taken, and then she can apply for some relief fund. If it is after the conviction, then it goes to a separate cell, and you can ask the registry of the court. They will guide you from the Legal Services Authority. Somebody has asked that she is an NGO person who comes in POXO cases. Defense counsel is not allowing us to come inside. Now that is wrong. You have to apply the POXO. You have to show the section to the judge. The child has to be represented in a POXO trial, and it's best to work it out with the judge first. And the judge will allow you to come inside if it is a very sensitive case. For all the cases, the judges may not be allowing, I don't know. But now under POXO, the judges must allow.
Ma'am, kindly switch on your video. Somehow, while doing the PPTs, you switched it off.
Okay, but I can't see the chat.
Chat, I will read it, ma'am, for you.
Okay, this is my video. Okay. I don't mind anything.
Yes.
This is my video. Now, what do I do?
Please share the books names which you have written.
Yeah, you can share the presentation with anyone who wants it.
Books, the books which you have written. The books.
Book. I have written a book, Tangible Justice. If you go on on Amazon, you will get it either under my name, Roshan Dalvi, or under Tangible Justice. So these are my memories as a judge. They are in 35 chapters. One chapter is criminal jurisdiction. And in that chapter, I've given these 2 cases and other cases.
Ma'am, we don't have any other questions.
Okay.
So so thank you, friends, those who have been connected with us with today's webinar, and those who want to watch this video or any other video of the Beyond Law CLC, they can share, subscribe, and like the Beyond Law CLC video on the YouTube channel, and that can be seen. And tomorrow's, in our pursuit to these webinars, we are in fact having, it will be in 3 parts on the motor accident claims. Tomorrow is the first part on the motor accident claims, that is understanding liabilities and facets. That is by Mr. S. Srinivas Raghavan, an advocate of Madurai bench, that is Madras High Court. And he has also been on this platform, and his insights on different perspectives are doing very well on the YouTube as well as on the Facebook. So do stay connected with us tomorrow in our pursuit to these webinars. And thank you again, ma'am, for a session which had a different perspective, which had a different perspective to be seen. And it will actually go in a long way for the understanding, not only for the lawyers, like we have seen on the webinar. Some NGO people have also joined and other people have also joined, which are beyond the profession. So it will be a session which they can actually look upon. And thank you once again. Stay blessed, stay safe, and everybody enjoy life. Thank you. Namaskar.
Okay, thank you.